Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a US political update concerning, well actually the US, Venezuela, Colombia, Trinidad and Tobago, concerning the whole region. It appears that the sixth supposed drug boat has been sunk in international waters. Supposedly these are Venezuelan cartel drug boats full of narco-terrorists that the US has seemingly declared war on, except they haven't. There's no such thing, and I've talked about this before. I don't want to go into the details. It is illegal. What they're doing is illegal. There might be a difference between morality and legality here. You might think it's good that they're blowing up drug cartel members in these boats, but it is still illegal. It's illegal by international rules. It's illegal by the US's own sort of military guidelines or whatnot. It is breaking the norms. And this is a slippery slope, because if you say, well, it's okay if we blow up without any due process boats with enemies in that we decide are enemies, these are narco-terrorists, extremist terrorists, and then you're saying that, oh, Antifa are now extremist terrorists, and Antifa, essentially our political opposition activists, are functionally equivalent to these terrorists over here. They've got the same label, and we're okay with blowing these people up without due process. Can we blow our own political opposition up without due process? So it might sound ridiculous, but that's essentially what this is paving the way for. This is a slippery slope, and it is, as I mentioned, illegal. Anyway, one wondered why, when Pete Hegseth became the Secretary for Defense, now Secretary of War, one of the first things he did was purge some of the leadership, but also purge JAGs. These are military lawyers that tell you whether what you're doing is legal or not, and veto you from doing things that are outrageous. He purged those people, and the only reason you would do that would be to give you permission to do things that would otherwise be labelled as illegal. Well, if we get rid of the people that are going to tell us that this is illegal and stop us from doing it because it's illegal, then we can just go out and do this. And that's exactly what happened. So got rid of the JAGs, went into Venezuela, are blowing up these boats, and it turns out that these boats, we just don't know, actually, is the reality. No one knows whether these people truly are drug runners or whether they are mainly drug runners, but with some innocents on board, maybe even children, who knows? There's no evidence being provided by the US government as to who these people are. And so you are going on the mere assertion that these are all narco-terrorists, even though some boats turned around. We're now hearing various claims. Trinidadian family says the US military killed a relative in a boat attack. There are claims that actually 2 Trinidadians have been killed. Report the United States murdered 2 men from Trinidad and Tobago in yesterday's US strike on a boat in the Caribbean Sea during the fake anti-drug military operations against Venezuela. Well, I don't know whether these Trinidadians were fishermen, as is being claimed, or whether they were drug runners that were operating out of Venezuela. But even if these people are drug runners, it doesn't change the illegality of what the United States is doing. This is international waters. These aren't their citizens, and they are killing them. They are murdering these people in the same way that you wouldn't find it acceptable if across the road there was a house that you suspected was a drug running house, and it just blew up because 3 missiles slammed into that house in the middle of the day. Aren't we supposed to arrest these people? Aren't we supposed to try and find as much evidence as possible to get over the legal threshold of putting them through a lawsuit, through the court system, and then hopefully we'll eventually find them guilty, and then we'll give them the punishment that is due to them based on the laws that we have of the land, which is not capital punishment, which is not death by missile. So there is no due process taking place here, and we have 2 Trinidadians killed.
2 men believed to be Trinbagonians were killed in the latest U.S. drone strike of Venezuelan waters. And now a Las Cuevas family is demanding answers.
They say Chad Joseph wasn't a trafficker, just a young man trying to come home. Jensen Levent went to the fishing village to speak with the family.
Like most of the men gathered here at the Las Cuevas fishing depot, Chad Joseph was a fisherman. Both his relatives and residents are denying strenuously that he was involved in drug trafficking. They say his killing was unjust.
so on and so forth, right? So there's a denial there that these were drug traffickers. The US military also struck a boat in the Caribbean targeting Colombians. So the Colombian president came out and said, hang on, so at least one of our peeps has been killed. So it's not just Venezuela, but now Colombia. Maybe that was purposeful. Maybe they didn't know that a Colombian was on board. Maybe they weren't drug traffickers. Either way, this seems to be fairly, I don't know if indiscriminate's the right word, but there seems to be scant regard for legality here. That's for sure. In the striking of a number of different boats that are killing a number of people from different countries. There seem to be 27 people that are now being killed, as well as there being survivors reported. Survivors after the latest US military strike on a scare quotes drug boat. And it's interesting that here Sky News is putting drug boat in inverted commas because there is no proof provided by the American government that these are indeed drug boats. Anyway, so that's all stuff that's happened that we know about, and there's talk about this being highly controversial, that people contesting the legality, and it's not going down well with certain politicians in the region. It was brought up in the United Nations meeting just recently. Before we get to the main the core kind of content for this video, let's just go to Representative Himes here, who is on, I think, a National Security Committee. He's a Democrat representative.
Narcotics. And then finally, as an intelligence guy, I can tell you this. If you've got the capability to blow a boat out of the water, you've got the capability to interdict it, to arrest everyone on board, to interrogate them. And now you're finding out where it was going, where it came from, who the bosses are, who the distribution networks are. When you turn a bunch of people into a smoking wreck, you don't get any of that stuff. All you get is a bunch of testosterone-fueled White House aides pounding on their chest. Again, illegal. And I'm on my soapbox about this, Ben, because too many of my Republican colleagues are like, we should do more of this. We should do, it's so great to see it's Hollywood and stuff. Folks, we always regret that kind of thinking. When we put Japanese Americans into concentration camps in the United States in World War II, at the time, that probably seemed like a good idea. Did not seem in retrospect like a good idea, right? The McCarthy era where we were ruining people, a senator from Wisconsin ruining people's careers. Well, they were communists, they deserve it. And in retrospect, those are the darkest moments in our history. And so I'm going to keep sounding the alarm on this, because 10 years from now, this is going to turn out to be yet another assault on the rule of law. And by the way, a really bad way of stopping the flow of drugs into our country.
It's not a lot I disagree with them. We just heard news the other day of the Royal Navy in and around, was it the Gulf of Oman or Red Sea, shooting a drug boat and with sniper taking out the engine, and then it's incapacitated, and then they board it, and then they seize 35 million pounds worth of drugs or something like that. And you're thinking, that's how to do it properly, so it can be done. So the excuse that the Americans keep giving is that interdicting isn't doing the job. It's not stopping them here and whatnot. Here we have Jessica Tarlov, the only liberal on Fox News, casting her opinion.
I remember the day the first boat was struck, and Jesse told me, do you want to be on the side of narco-terrorists? And I said, no, not especially. Let's see where this goes. And now we're up to multiple boats, and it's not just Venezuelan boats. The Colombians say that one of the boats was theirs, and that 2 Colombian nationals, I think 2 or 3, were murdered when they were struck, and that they weren't drug traffickers. Now, do I know if that's the case or not? I'm not sure, but there is a reason that we're—
Don't let that stop you.
Well, don't let the
I absolutely despise people like Greg Gutfield and Jesse Walters, like laughing at, don't let that stop you. Ha ha ha. You've literally killed people without due process. That is murder. By any definition, that is murder. And all she's asking for, she says, I don't know whether these are drug traffickers or not, but can we have some due process? That's why we have the rule of law. And these fecking idiots on Fox News are just, oh no rule of law. And yet at the same time, they'll be screaming habdabs about Benghazi and Hillary Clinton's emails. And it's just the rank hypocrisy is insane.
Stop you.
Well, don't let the Constitution stop you. And there's supposed to be oversight. As Dana mentioned, there are Republicans and Democrats alike saying, this is turning into more of a habit than just striking one boat, and that we are supposed to have a say in this. And historically speaking, and I know you're going to make fun of me, but
I will.
That's why I come to work every day. Drug traffickers were considered criminals with due process rights. And this is the conversation we've been having as well about undocumented people in this country who also have due process rights, as Antonin Scalia affirmed. And I don't know if it's a good precedent or road to be going down that he's essentially starting some degree of war without Congress being able to see anything. The intel community, the people who chair these committees are not getting to see what it is that, the basis for the actions that they're taking. And I don't think that you're going to be that comfortable with the idea of them going into Venezuelan land without there being any verification besides, Trump and Pete Hegseth said so.
Absolutely. And well said. So then what's happened, so the core of this is that rather coincidentally, the US military commander overseeing the escalating attacks on these boats in the Caribbean has said to be retiring now. He's taking early retirements. As Don Winslow says, Jesus, this is a huge story. I wish we would receive more coverage. They're literally, in my opinion, executing people in real time, no arrest, no trial. And there is evidence in various media stories, including witness interviews, that they have killed at least one or more innocent fishermen. So Admiral Alvin Holsey has, scare quotes, retired. Zachary Cohen here says, the Admiral overseeing US Southern Command, which has responsibility for forces in the Caribbean, where American forces have carried out multiple legally ambiguous strikes against alleged drug cartels, is retiring 1 year into his tenure. And he then says tensions were simmering between Hegseth and Holsey for weeks. Hegseth did not believe Holsey was moving quickly or aggressively enough to combat drug traffickers in the Caribbean, and complained about not being given information he needed about ops per sources. But Southcom was concerned about ops not being lawful, sources added. So Holsey, it appears, was worried that these strikes aren't lawful because, do you know what? They are not lawful, and therefore was putting up some barriers to continue to do this, and now he has ended up being retired. Ed Krasenstein says, we need Benghazi-like hearings now. Admiral Alvin Holsey, head of the US Southern Command, has stepped down after reportedly raising concerns about the Trump administration's recent drug boat strikes off Venezuela, according to the New York Times. Now, I have been unable to access that. It's behind a paywall, but I can't even get the archived versions. It's not working. Anyway, this comes after Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino asserted last week that the US government is fully aware the boats are not involved in drug trafficking. The strikes, which killed 27 people across several operations in the Caribbean, have drawn scrutiny after Trump publicly celebrated one that killed 6 suspected traffickers. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced Halsey's early retirement just days later, less than a year after he assumed command. In other words, that Halsey assumed command. So, there's no way this is an early retirement he's just decided to do. Like, this is a forced move here. Sources say Halsey questioned both the legality and the scope of the attacks. To be clear, says the Tennessee Holler here, although they aren't officially saying why he is stepping down, Admiral Holsey had reportedly, quote, raised concerns about Trump, Hegseth, blowing up boats in international waters that they claim had drugs on them. This is a quote, I think, from NBC News, but one current and one former US official, both of whom spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss personnel matters, said that Admiral Holsey had raised concerns about the mission and the attacks on the alleged drug boats. Same sort of thing reported in a number of different outlets. This is The Independent. He stepped down after expressing concern with the attacks, according to a new report. The strike was conducted in international waters. The 6 male narco terrorists aboard the vessel were killed in the strike. No US forces were harmed. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Trump wrote on Truth Social. And then 2 days later, Hegseth announces that Holsey is taking early retirement. So we have Some have raised worries about the legality of the strikes, and the White House has not provided any proof that the targeted boats were carrying drugs. Venezuelan defense minister insisted last week the US government knows the boats are not being used for drug trafficking, and the Senate even tried to pass a war powers resolution last week that would have blocked the Trump administration from conducting the strikes unless Congress authorized them. It failed 51-48. I thought it passed that in 51-48 anyway, with 2 GOP lawmakers voting with nearly all the Democrats in favor of it. And then we have this. So this is Eric Trump, Donald Trump's son, sounding off.
And now every single time a boat goes out of Venezuela, it's get blown up into a million pieces, Martha. That's exactly what's happening every single day. I personally have 4 friends that have lost children to fentanyl. This is real life for all of us. I mean,
fentanyl does not come from Venezuela. In fact, people are saying that if you look at the drugs that do come out of Venezuela, like Venezuela is all that type of drug. Venezuela is not the major exporter to the US of that type of drug. Venezuela, this looks to be much more about Maduro and Venezuela and oil and trying to provoke Venezuela into reacting so that there can be an actual kinetic war between the two countries. But complaining about fentanyl, that somehow fentanyl is coming from Venezuela and these boats getting blown up. I mean, look, I know people who've had kids that have died from fentanyl, and like this is reality, etc., etc. It's just absolute nonsense. I'm not taking away from the fact that people are dying from fentanyl, but it ain't coming from Venezuela. It's coming across the border from Mexico, from China, and yeah, anyway. It's just a ridiculous statement there from Eric Trump. And then I'm going to leave you with 2 things. First of all, another retiree, Doug Krugman. This is being repeated quite a lot online. U.S. Marine Corps colonel and combat veteran has resigned after 24 years of service from the military because of Trump. So he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post stating, and I quote, United States military officers take an oath to defend the Constitution without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. I swore or repeated that oath under 5 presidents, starting with the former President Bill Clinton. I risked my life for it, serving as an infantry officer in 2 wars. I watched Marines die for it. No commander-in-chief is perfect. President Clinton's moral failures are well known. President George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq might be one of the worst errors in US history. All recent presidents share responsibility for our failure in Afghanistan. I continued to serve despite all that because I believe the Constitution brought the country more success than failure, and I believed our presidents took the oaths to it seriously. With President Trump, I no longer believe that. During his first term, his actions became increasingly difficult for me to justify, culminating in the January 6th attack on Congress as it tried to execute its duties. I hoped he had learned from those errors, but it took only a few days of his second term for me to realize that he had not. I could not swear without reservation to follow a commander-in-chief who seemed so willing to disregard the Constitution. Worse than immorality, however, has been President Trump's willingness to disregard the law and Constitution to achieve his goals. When asked in May about the Fifth Amendment requirements for due process and if he needed to uphold the Constitution as president, the first words out of his mouth were, "I don't know." Instead of trying to work within the Constitution or to amend it, President Trump is testing how far he can ignore it. If voters and legislators cannot close the gaps in our laws to clarify the limits to presidential power, those who serve our government will continue to struggle. The next president or of either party may continue us down this path towards collapse. I voluntarily gave up my rank as the president suggested, but the future of our country is more important than any individual's career. What he's referring to is when the president and Hegseth spoke to the assembled commanders, and they said, "Look, if you don't agree with what we're saying, just resign." And then this guy's resigned. He said, "Look, I voluntarily gave up my rank as the president suggested, but the future of our country is more important than any individual's career, wealth, or power. I have no regrets about my decision. I've given up the service I loved for the freedom to do the right thing, the freedom to speak my mind, and the freedom to speak in defense of our country." Interesting. It kind of fits in line with this, although it's not necessarily connected to Venezuela. It really is in the sense of what the US command is doing and how unconstitutional it is being. Habeas corpus, due process, etc., etc. Sam Steen from the Bulwark says, "Congratulations to our new in-house Pentagon press corps." So we heard the good news is after the bad news. Well, the bad news initially was Pete Hegseth, as the Secretary of War, stated that you cannot report on the Pentagon or on the military without getting the Pentagon to sign off what you have written. In other words, we want dictatorial oversight over what was once a free press. The First Amendment sanctifying freedom of speech is no longer relevant when you are reporting on the Pentagon. We must sign off everything you are reporting, everything you're writing. Now, the press corps, including Fox News and Newsmax, two who sit most on the right supporting everything the government does, with almost unanimity said, we are not going to sign this. And they kind of marched out the Pentagon. There are these permanent desks in the Pentagon and so on and so forth. They're like, no, we're not doing that. It turns out that OAN was the only American mainstream sort of media outlet, sort of, that agreed to sign up to this. Anyway, congrats to our new in-house Pentagon press corps. This is now the press corps in the Pentagon that has agreed to sign up to what the Pentagon has dictated and now makes up the press corps. The Federalist, the Epoch Times, so two like batshit crazy right-wing outlets. OAN, this TV news outlet that is further to the right than Fox. Turkish newspaper Aksam, 3 individuals from the Turkish state-run Anadolu agency, 2 Turkish freelancers, a reporter from the Australian, an Afghan freelancer, and 3 lesser-known operations, AWPS News, the India Globe, and a blog called USA Journal Korea. That is now, as according to the Washington Post, the press corps in the Pentagon, as the country slides towards authoritarianism and away from the rule of law and support of and by the Constitution. Blowing up boats, getting rid of your lawyers that vetoes that, lying about blowing up boats, and this is all about fentanyl. You are seeing the US military, and with it being sent into cities around the US based on lies. Portland's burning to the ground. They can't even build shop stores there. They have to be made out of plywood. Total nonsense. Wants to send in the army, picking up people on the streets, militarizing cities. This is all part of this move to strangle political opposition and to take, I think, long-lasting control over the United States. It is desperate. Yeah. Anyway, that's my tuppence. Speak soon.